Imperialist weebs and Japanese neo-nationalists are so chronically online, and their rhetoric is exactly the same as Western far-right groups. For those of you unfamiliar with Japanese nationalism, anti-Korean and anti-Chinese sentiment is at the core of their ideology. It's the same as how Western far-right ideology revolves around anti-blackness and anti-Semitism. This commenter is just wrong, but we can talk about how Japanese, Koreans, Chinese, and Taiwanese, aka Zainichi, were systematically pushed and stereotyped as criminals, similar to how black and brown people have been in the West. Korea and Taiwan were the oldest colonies of the Japanese Empire, and these people were Japanese citizens under Imperial Japan, many of them who were born into citizenship and lived there. And despite the discrimination, Imperial Japan's plan was to fully integrate their colonial subjects as Japanese nationals, not unlike the forced assimilation of Native Americans in North America. This is why they made everybody change their names to Japanese ones, they tried to wipe out their languages and only allow Japanese education and religion, and they even encouraged intermarriage. Fun fact, until 1993, primary schools in Korea were called 국민학교, which comes from the Japanese term kokumin-gakko, which actually means citizen school, and it had an underlying meaning that it's a school that creates loyal citizens to the Japanese emperor. But what happened after 1945? By December of that year, Zainichi people got their voting rights taken away. 2 years later, in 1947, they went from citizens to provisional foreign aliens and got the rest of their rights taken away. In 1949, the Prime Minister of Japan proposed to Douglas MacArthur the deportation of all Zainichi Koreans, including the ones who were forced to come there and the children who were born there. He claimed that it was unfair for the Japanese government to purchase food for these quote-unquote illegal aliens that they themselves just made illegal. He said they weren't contributing to the Japanese economy and committing political crimes, which is very ironic because many of them ended up there in the first place because of Japan's political crimes. Another reason why the Prime Minister said this was because since 1945, Zainichi people were legally barred from all public sector jobs. The private sector were allowed to hire non-nationals except ethnic Koreans because they were not allowed to work quote-unquote Japanese jobs, aka professional jobs. These kind of xenophobic policies pushed Zainichi people to pursue more informal jobs such as scrap recycling, alcohol production, and later on running pachinko parlors and even joining the Yakuza. In 1950, the nationality law took away citizenship from mixed Zainichi children who had Japanese mothers, and only those with Japanese fathers could keep their citizenship. Their legal status took another hit in 1952 when they went from provisional foreign aliens to official foreign aliens. And for the Zainichi Koreans, this was an especially tricky situation because after colonization, Korea was under another proxy war and their status as a nation was very ambiguous. Essentially, the Zainichi Koreans became stateless, not Japanese, not Korean, not North or South because the country wasn't divided yet. And because they were now officially foreign aliens, they were barred from government housing, national healthcare insurance, and any foreign aid coming into Japan from Western countries. In 1955, the government implemented the Alien Registration Ordinance, where all Zainichi people had to get fingerprinted, which meant that their ethnic identity would be revealed to the public. And the discrimination was so bad at this time that this was legitimately dangerous. This fingerprinting law was in place till 1993, so future generations of Zainichi people had to go through this as well. In 1965, 20 years after they surrendered, the government allowed Zainichi people to apply for permanent residency, but their children could not. It wasn't until 26 years later in 1991 that Zainichi people were able to get special permanent residency status, which granted the length of stay indefinitely like normal citizens. Naturalization was also an option, but until 1987, Zainichi people would have to once again change their name to a Japanese one, which was just another reminder of imperialism. Nowadays, Korea-Japan relations have largely normalized, especially with Korean pop culture becoming more popular overseas, and with many Zainichi celebrities openly embracing their Korean ancestry in public. And naturalization for Zainichi people is viewed more as an individual choice rather than a political statement in both Korea and Japan. However, this doesn't mean that xenophobia is just solved now, it just moved mostly online. And with far-right Japanese politicians always being in power, in fact they never left, this hatred is a consistent source of fear and anguish for ethnic minorities in Japan.